Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Blue Dog Whisperer. First episode in quite a long time. It's actually the season 3 premiere, first episode in 2022. And I am so happy to have a couple of guests on. Right now, we have Jess Meath and Kristen Day from the Democrats for Life of America. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Got it right.
Okay, well, thank you both so much for coming on this podcast. Want a lot to talk about because the abortion issue is such a heated debate, and it's got Democrats divided. Even though the majority of the Democratic Party is pro-choice and the majority of the Republican Party is pro-life, there are exceptions to the rules. There's a Republicans for Choice group, and you got some pro-choice Republicans, you got some pro-life Democrats, and I wanted to get your thoughts on the importance of having pro-life people in the Democratic Party and why it's so important that we have a nice balance of views on this issue in our party.
Yeah, I've been doing this for a long time, and when we first formed, there were more pro-life Democrats in the party. There were more pro-choice Democrats and pro-choice Republicans in their party. And as it became more polarized, it's just become more of a political issue, and we've forgotten what this is really about. And it's about the women and the children and protecting both of them. And so we really feel like there is a really necessary need for more pro-life voices within the Democratic Party to really provide more balance so we can get back to what we are supposed to be focusing on, not just tossing this around like a political football, raising money off of it, and just really forgetting that we're talking about people.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Jess, would you like to add on to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad that we're talking about our focus, which is women and children, especially in this battle with Roe v. Wade. I feel like the media especially isn't touching on who's really being affected here, and that's women and their children. And we go off of what if these women had the real resources and the real support that they need during and after pregnancy. And last night I was watching a speech that Governor Newsom in California had uploaded to his TikTok account. And he was saying that these people that are saying that they're pro-life, well, what about legislation that's going to support these women and their children, like paid maternal leave, paid family leave, funding for better social programs, healthcare? And I was watching this, I'm like, this is what Democrats for Life of America is about. Everything that he listed that he was upset that pro-lifers seem to not care about is everything that we're advocating for. Mm-hmm. And so it's so important that we have a group that's representing what these women need, real support and real resources.
Yeah, to just add on to that too, I think you have a good point, Jess, in that, when, we have somebody like Governor Newsom talking about what pro-life is about, like, they accuse the pro-lifers of only caring about the baby in the womb. And then they make this big pitch about only carrying the baby after the baby's born. Mm-hmm. We bring those two sides together and say, all life is worthy of protection, and we must protect baby in the womb and outside the womb. And so we're the consistent voice that we feel like our party should be the consistent voice for this. We have half of it right. Now we need to get the other half.
And that's what makes you guys different from a lot of pro-life Republicans, because you do care about that social safety net that a lot of members of the GOP have kind of neglected people on. It's basically from womb to tomb is how you guys see it, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep. From life for the whole life, as my sign says.
And that was I'm a pro-choice person. I come from that old school Bill Clinton philosophy of it should be safe, legal, and rare. But I was of a mind that Henry Cuellar was pro-life for the whole life. And I respect that because, as an uncle, I find that I like the idea of choice more, but I also like the idea of abortion less, because I wouldn't want a woman to be pressured into having a baby without all the resources. But I also value life and think that when you can have children, you should have children. And I think that is such an important area to discuss, because obviously not every person who is pro-life who's pro-choice is a Democrat. And I actually think that my philosophy of pro-choice is actually consistent with conservative values, and that is that it's none of the government's business. Whereas one could make the argument that being pro-life is consistent with democratic values of we must do everything we can to help everyone.
Mhm.
Oh, you nailed it. That is absolutely right. I've always say that like being pro-life is more consistent with democratic values of helping the vulnerable, helping those in need.
Mhm.
And yes, the government out of personal business is more of a Republican philosophy. So I think that's why our work is so important, and we have to continue to have this voice within the party promoting this consistent life ethic.
So your organization, and I join you for this, actually, was recently making phone calls for Congressman Henry Cuellar, who I endorsed in a video. I don't know if you saw the video on Facebook. He actually reposted to his Facebook page, so I was very honored about that. But Congressman Henry Cuellar is the last pro-life Democrat in the House of Representatives. During the Clinton years, there were way more than one. And I believe that he's going to pull it off by a very narrow margin. I think it's like under 200 votes. What do you think would have been the message to pro-life people, especially in the Latino community, the Latino Catholic community, who I believe more than half of them are pro-life, that if Henry Cuellar had been voted out in the primary, what message would that have sent to Latino people who may want to vote Democrat, but also hold these Catholic values and these religious values that say, before you were formed in the womb, I knew you, that biblical philosophy.
Mhm.
What message would that have sent to these religious people?
Well, first, I think if the Democratic leadership recognized that he was the only person who could keep that seat in Democratic hands, honestly, it was a D+4 district. We had Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, and James Clyburn endorse Henry Cuellar because they knew that if Henry Cuellar does not win that seat, the Republican will win.
Mhm.
So I think it is a Hispanic woman in the Republican side running against Henry Cuellar. I believe she was the one who won the primary. We'll have to just
Yes.
fact check that.
I think her last
Mhm.
name is Garcia. I can't remember the first name, but I'm pretty sure.
Right. And so I think it does send. We do see more Hispanic voters turning toward the Republican. We also see this in the Black community on this issue. So the Democratic Party really needs to wake up and realize that this big tent philosophy is a winning strategy and the smaller tent is a losing policy strategy. And because the Democratic leadership did support Cuellar, they recognize this a little bit, but if they can keep a pro-choice seat like they did up in defeating Dan Lipinski, they'll always looks like they will side with the pro-choice person if they think that person can win. So we still have a lot of work to do in showing pro-life voters in the Hispanic community and the Black community that this is a place where we can be within the Democratic Party and to advocate for protecting life.
Mhm. Did you want to add anything to that, Jess?
No, Kristen stated it perfectly.
Yes, I agree with that 100% because it seems like that there's this sort of false idea that Democrats are retaining the Latino community and the Black community. And actually, New Jersey, where I'm from, on Wikipedia, there was a map of the 2020 presidential election. And obviously, President Biden did very well in Black communities. However, there was also another map that showed how the whether the town got more red or blue since the 2020 election. And interestingly enough, the white areas became more Democratic in a lot of New Jersey, but the Black areas like Penns Grove, which is near me, or Salem or Bridgeton or Camden, actually voted at a higher percentage for Trump than it did in 2016. So there's something about the GOP or the Democratic Party that is losing these minority voters. And one could argue that it is this abortion issue.
Do you want to comment on that, Jess? Do you want to?
Yeah. I have met so many people that, well, I'm Catholic, so I have met so many people in my church community that feel so conflicted come election season of, I cannot vote Republican, and I get this asked all the time. Well, how are you a pro-life Democrat? Like, how does this work? And a lot of people I feel like it's this issue of abortion that they feel like they cannot vote in good conscience for somebody who is pro-choice, and they'd rather even sit out of an election and not even vote at all. So 1000%, just from my lens, it's abortion, and it's such a strong issue, such an important issue. And glad, rightly so, it's an important issue, but just feeling like they have nobody else to vote for.
Mhm.
Yep. And I think we see some examples of the shifting, particularly within the Black community, of, I guess, with the chart that you were looking at, but also in Connecticut, where we had 0 pro-life allies. We had a Trenae McGee won a special election in December, and Connecticut was set to pass this terrible abortion bill, which they did. But for the first time in a long time in Connecticut, we had 17 people vote, 17 Democrats vote against expanding abortion. And it was largely due to Trenae McGee, a young Black woman, speaking up against abortion and how abortion affects the Black community. Because we hear a lot of abortion rights people saying that, well, it's racist to stop abortion because the Black community needs abortion. And she was making the converse argument. Well, we don't think that aborting Black babies is really a good solution for us. And so I think in the House we had 14 Democrats vote with her against allowing non-doctors to perform abortion and some other just abortion expansion things. And most of them were Black. And the 3 senators who voted against it were also Black. And one woman was pro-choice, but she said, this makes me feel very uncomfortable to making this kind of care less safe for women. And it was just a very low level of discomfort. So I see a lot of increased interest in the Black community of speaking out more on this issue and also running. We had 2 candidates who are going to runoffs in Georgia, one Black woman in Georgia, one Black woman in Alabama going to runoffs, and they're running as pro-life Democrats. So it's pretty exciting to see these voices speaking out.
And I feel like adding on to that with the powerful testimony from Representative McGee and her fellow representatives and senators, they all touched on this one fact of no one asks us what we want. No one asks the Black community what we want. It's always abortion is presented as the best and only option, but no one's actually asking us what we want and what resources and support we need. And it was really harrowing and touching on the statistics and these personal testimonies that these representatives were sharing, that they have met people in their lives who felt like they had no other option but abortion because everyone just assumed that it's what they wanted, especially in lower income and minority communities.
Well, I call that paternalistic progressivism, and I think that it's actually a really significant issue in the Democratic Party because, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know how recent this statistic was, but I believe that more in New York City, more Black fetuses are aborted than born alive. And
Yep.
I remember you guys, because I've been following your Facebook page for a while. The guy who I was supporting for New York City Mayor, Andrew Yang, came under a lot of fire for simply saying that abortion is tragic, even though he's pro-choice. And I was thinking, technically he's right, because if the reason behind getting an abortion is tragic, if the abortion isn't tragic itself, which I think it's a tragic option, even if I think it should be safe, legal, and rare, the idea that you need to do that is tragic. There's got to be some tragedy behind that decision to make that heartbreaking choice. And
yeah, I one thing about Andrew Yang and his Yang Gang, I love the Yang Gang. And when we were doing the presidential run, we would go to all the presidential debates and we'd have our pro-life or the whole life banner, trying to, have conversations with people who were supporting other candidates and saying you have to make room for pro-lifers in the party. Every single Yang campaign person that I met, and they were the only campaign to do so, was like, yes, there should be room for pro-life Democrats in the party. And we're the only ones offering solutions because we want to support pregnant women, with the universal income. And every single campaign volunteer made the case of why pro-lifers should support Andrew Yang. None of the other campaigns made any effort whatsoever. So we have a lot of people supporting within the pro-life community, supporting Andrew Yang simply because he made an effort and showed that he cared about our issue, an issue that was important to us. And I agree with you on safe, legal, and rare. Let's get back there.
Absolutely.
Safe, legal, and rare is where our party should stand. It's where everyone should have agreement on. Even though we'd like to see no abortions, I think pro-life Democrats could completely unify with our party around safe, legal, and rare.
I don't know what happened to that, because it seems like that, people object to the rare part, and that
Yes.
I honestly
How
don't
can,
get it, because I think the majority of Americans are not there yet. It seems like
Mhm.
that the parties are shifting away from the sensible censor on this issue, because there's always
Mhm.
areas of gray, but I don't know. I heard a black conservative say that if Republicans were pushing abortion rights onto the American public like Democrats are, they'd be accused of trying to limit the black population for electoral gains or advantages. And it seems like that what you were saying about how in many communities it feels like that a lot of people are not presented with other options. Uh,
Mhm.
and they're not represented. I don't know. It resonates with me
Mhm.
for sure.
Mhm.
I
yeah,
wanted.
because just did a lot of work with women who were seeking abortion. So she has a little bit more expertise than I do
Mhm.
on, that I haven't worked directly with abortion-minded women, but
Mhm.
yeah.
Yes, yes. Before I came to Democrats for Life of America, I worked with a nonprofit that financially assists women in crisis pregnancies. So they feel like there is an option, that just because they're facing economic hardship, that doesn't mean that they can't keep their baby. So I directly worked with these women one on one during and after their pregnancy. I worked with so many women, and it was almost always economic hardship that they were struggling. And so we met that gap. And um, the nonprofit went off of the statistic from Guttmacher Institute that 73% of women seek abortion due to economic hardship. And they were bridging that gap. And I was led to Democrats for Life of America because I felt like after working with these women and trying to get them connected with these resources, with these social safety nets, I realized there was this disconnect, that for some reason it was so hard to get them connected with these resources. And so it brought me to Democrats for Life of America, that this is the org that is addressing this issue, that we are fighting for this legislation, and not only for these social safety nets, but so women can have the connections and access to them. That was really the main part, that they're here, but um why aren't they getting the support that they need? There's just a missing piece.
Mhm. Well, one other issue that really, as a pro-choice person, I would definitely agree with you guys on, is the need for the Hyde Amendment. And for anyone who's listening who doesn't know, it basically prohibits taxpayer funding federally for abortions, except in rare cases of rape, life, incest. I believe those are the exceptions. You
Yep.
can correct me if I'm wrong.
Mhm.
Right.
I've always thought that the Supreme Court ruled that Roe v. Wade, that abortion rights should be legal because it's a right to privacy. So my question is, if it's a private decision, why shouldn't it be funded publicly? I've never understood that. And that's one of the reasons why I support the Hyde Amendment. But why have recent Democratic candidates for president like Hillary and Biden proposed lifting the Hyde Amendment? What gain is there politically for that?
I think it's just catering to the abortion rights base. I don't. There's no really good reason to do it. A majority of Americans, even pro-choice Americans, pretty unified on that. They don't want taxpayer funding of abortion. And I agree with you. There is some inconsistencies, like my body, my choice. So yes, why are you asking the government to pay for it then? Like,
Mhm.
just if you want to go off and do what you want to do, go ahead. But don't get us involved. But I was just talking with Senator Manchin's office this morning, so I think we're secure in maintaining the Hyde Amendment. And so I'm not sure that that's going to be the focus next year because of the possibility that Roe could be overturned. I think more of the focus is going to be on trying to codify Roe. So I think the Hyde Amendment is pretty secure for now.
Mhm.
Mhm.
As it should be.
Yeah, yeah.
What
It's had bipartisan support for decades.
Mhm.
what is your organization's position on Planned Parenthood and federal funding for Planned Parenthood? I'm not familiar with the stance on it, so I wanted to get your.
Yeah, want me to take this one, Jess?
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, so our position on Planned Parenthood is we would like to see them defunded until they separate their abortion business from their family planning services, because right now they know that money is supposed to be for families and supporting families. It's not supposed to be for abortion. And if you look at the numbers of Planned Parenthood, what they do is the number of abortions they did was about 330,000. The number of pregnancy services, this is not even number of pregnant women that they supported, pregnant services. So that means it could be 5,000 women or 10,000 women, but the number of pregnancy services is 15,000. So that number dwarfs the abortion numbers. So we have suggested that they separate their abortion business completely and use, if they're getting federal money, to use it to support pregnant women. Compete with the pregnancy centers and try to provide more pregnancy services than the pregnancy centers are providing. That was one of our complaints about when Texas passed their heartbeat law. So instead of shifting and providing what the new need was in Texas, which was women after 8 weeks could not get abortions. So instead of shifting and providing more services to pregnant women, they either shut down or they just were like, well, now we can't perform abortions. So now what do we do? So they used money to ship women to other states to get abortion. So I think so until they are less abortion focused and more family planning and family support, we support defunding them. And in fact, when they were trying to defund Planned Parenthood in the Senate several years ago, we made the suggestion, like, we don't want the money cut because we think that money's so important to help families. We're Democrats. We believe that the government has a responsibility to help people. And so we suggested that they instead shift the money to community health centers, which vastly outnumber, or federally qualified health clinics, which just vastly outnumber the Planned Parenthoods. I think there's 600 Planned Parenthood facilities in California. No, I don't know, maybe less than 1,000 nationwide. But there's like 10,000 community health centers all over the country, and they're more in the rural areas, and they serve a wider segment of the population. So we wanted to see that money instead go toward places that don't provide abortion but do provide pregnancy support, and healthcare for children, healthcare for women, healthcare for families. So that's our position on that. But just let's keep the money away from the abortion providers.
Yeah, because I was always of a mind that Planned Parenthood should be funded as well, especially with the Hyde Amendment in place, because one of my concerns about the Hyde Amendment was that if it's repealed, you're actually going to empower the Republicans who want not only Planned Parenthood defunded, but other women's health centers defunded, because now they can claim that the tax dollars are being used for abortions. I was afraid that it was actually going to do more harm than good by getting rid of that Hyde Amendment, because Planned Parenthood does do some really good things that are not abortion based, as you pointed out, but that was a concern of mine as far as getting rid of the Hyde Amendment.
Yeah, go ahead, Jess.
Yes, absolutely. And that is when we look at, as Kristen mentioned, all of these community centers that are helping women. I recently wrote on our Whole Life blog a few months ago, and I was looking into the research of how much money Planned Parenthood is actually receiving. And I believe in 2018 to 2019, they received like $600 million. And just imagine the transformation that would occur if that money went to these community health centers or these pregnancy resource centers, which pregnancy resource centers are 100% donor funded. They don't receive any money from the government. And I can just think about the difference that would occur if this money was allocated to support women. And I always think that the Hyde Amendment, the purpose of taxpayer funding of abortion is to help women in minority communities. Well, that going back to what Representative McGee was saying in her testimony, no one's asking us what we want. So if this money was just allocated differently, I can just how many families we would be serving and how many families we would be helping.
Right. I wanted to ask, how do you all think President Biden is doing so far? He's been in office for over a year. What do you think of his performance right now? I don't know if has he gotten rid of the Hyde Amendment? I don't think.
No, we were able to.
Not yet, but is he still pursuing that?
Yeah, we're pretty disappointed on the pro-life side of him changing his position and really, supporting the Women's Health Protection Act, which is worse than Roe. It goes further than Roe because the Women's Health Protection Act would allow abortions based on the sex of the baby. It would eliminate parental consent laws. It would basically eliminate any health and safety protections for babies. It would not allow any limitations. So abortion would be legal to up to 9 months all over the country.
Yeah.
So it's just extreme. And there was a poll up in New Hampshire, and a plurality of people, Democrat, Republican, pro-choice, pro-life, opposed the so-called Women's Health Protection Act. I don't know how you can seriously call it that when it says nothing of the sort. It does not protect women's health or safety. So yeah, we're not too thrilled with his. The budget contained the elimination of the Hyde Amendment and all conscience protections, forcing doctors to perform abortions against their will. So no, we're not very happy on his pro-life front whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think he's done some things that would maybe sway pregnant women? Like, do you think that he's helped the safety net that you were talking about that could actually reduce the number of abortions?
No, and I think to Jess's point about there are lots of programs out there, and even in California has one of the most generous social safety net packages out there. Yet it has one of the highest abortion rates in the nation. And what's missing is that piece of connecting the women to the resources that are out there. Because when you pay for abortion like California does, but you don't connect a woman with alternatives to abortion or real choice, it's a problem.
That's not consistent with safe, legal, rare. So yes, I get what you're saying 100%.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And in California, they were actually funding legislation that would market abortion. So it was so prejudiced. They were not even presenting any other option. They were marketing abortion and wanting to fund money to advertise for it.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Mm-hmm.
it seems a little, we don't see advertisements for prostate exams generally. I mean, why, I mean, it just seems like that a lot of medical procedures aren't advertised. So why is abortion being advertised? If what you're saying, I mean, I don't live in California. I assume what you're saying is true. I want to see it as well. But it seems interesting how they're really publicizing this choice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, emphasizing like this is the choice for women, and yeah, it's very disconcerting to see this this shift that we've seen since safe, legal, and rare to more of a abortion up to 9 months for any reason, and I love my abortion. Abortions are great, and let's celebrate abortion. And it's so harmful to women who regret their abortions or who are suffering from abortion, who feel guilty because they're abortion. When they see the celebration of it, it really causes a conflict. And we have a woman in Kansas who does post-abortion healing, one of our members, and to listening to the stories of the women is just really heartbreaking. And we just need to have more compassion and change our dialogue on this to support women. I mean, whether they choose life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to ask, because we have less than 5 minutes left. Who are some of the candidates that you are endorsing this year? I'd like to get our listeners to know about some of these candidates.
Yes, we have Henry Cuellar. We also have Joyce Griggs in Georgia District 1, who's running for the U.S. Congress. We have Pastor Chris Butler up in Chicago running for the U.S. House in Illinois District 1. We also have Yolanda Flowers, who is going to the runoff election for the governor of Alabama. We have very exciting and very bold and brave, unapologetic pro-life Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
We have a ton of other candidates too that these are kind of our top tier running for higher office, but we have a lot on the state and local level who are running too. I just received a text from Joel Sheltron, who's running in Michigan and for a state house seat there, and we have Angie Hatton in Kentucky, and we found out Jeff Turco in Massachusetts is running unopposed, so that's some good news. So we'll bring some of these pro-life Democrats back, and so they can. I think we need them to speak out, just like Trinae Media did, because when you speak out, more people are willing to follow and speak out as well.
There's no one having a voice of opposition in places like Connecticut, as you pointed out. So every option needs to be considered. Do you all have a website that our listeners can go to, or anything like that?
Yes, for these candidates.
Well, for your organization, yes.
Oh, for us, yes, democratsforlife.org.
Okay. Any final thoughts before we we leave it here?
No, but thank you so much for having us on. I think the pro-life and the Blue Dogs have some crossover, so we've had a lot of pro-life candidates who were in both caucuses. So we're just really thrilled to have this conversation and promote this point of view and promote the big tent of the Democratic Party and how that makes us stronger.
So many people, when I talk to them and they say, "Oh, pro-life Democrat, I've never heard of that." And I talk about their org, they're like, "Why didn't I know about this sooner?" Like, I used to be a Democrat, but because of this issue, I had to move. But your organization gives me hope. And so it's just always amazing to see that it's just about us letting people know that we exist. And that I always tell people too, because people assume that Democrats aren't pro-life. And I always say, well, the loudest ones are. We're just being shunned and shut out. But there are pro-life Democrats, and we are going to rise.
Absolutely. One who comes to mind is John Bel Edwards in Louisiana, one of the best governors in the country as far as I'm concerned. So I hope that your movement gains some traction in terms of visibility, and maybe we'll have a pro-life Democratic president someday. I don't know. We'll see. It just seems like that the national parties are pushing people to the base rather than letting them be true to their beliefs. So,
Right.
And that's one of the problems I have with partisan politics. But I thank you so much, both of you, for coming on. Really, really great discussion.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Evan.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
it.
Thank you.